time I talked about Miraculous, it was a more general look at the show and its feelings up until the then airing Season 5, going as in-depth as I possibly could, giving evidence for why I found it so infuriating. Since then, I've had people asking what my thoughts were on Season 5 itself when compared to the rest of the series thus far, and I'm nothing if not a people pleaser, so I'm gonna give it a go. If you somehow found this without seeing the prior videos in this series, I would recommend you watch those first so that you get a full picture of where I'm coming from, but it's not necessary, it'll just connect more dots for you. While you're here, I'd appreciate a lot if you could subscribe and share this if you liked it. I also started a Discord server if you'd like to join that as well. The link to that and my Patreon will be in the description. With that out of the way, I'm gonna cover everything I can in the season and the para special as well. So here's why Miraculous Season 5 makes me so angry.
Yeah, I mean, we spend a lot of time at school together as it is already, huh?
This is all thanks to you, Marinette. You gave me the courage to face my father.
In the big video, I criticized Marinette for being perfect and doing almost everything herself, and being hyper-competent despite being a klutz and a creep in every other aspect of her life. So what changed in Season 5? I'll be honest with this one, Marinette didn't really change. They more just cut down the stalker stuff with her, but otherwise she's remained mostly the same. When you boil it down, they really couldn't change much else about her given the trajectory of the plot. However, the removal of the stalker element was a universally praised thing for the season from what I heard, and it frees her out to be so much more than she once was. It also helps that the superhero side of things is more relegated to the B story this season, ironically, but we'll get to that later. Now, it's not all sunshine and rainbows with a spotted tick here. She still has anger issues, jealousy, self-confidence, and all that fun stuff to deal with, but removing the actual criminal things she was doing from her character is at the very least a step in the right direction for her. It's just a shame they didn't fix the ladybug balancing problem. Remember how she had the problem of being able to do basically everything in a lot of cases, and Cat was more just there to break things and make bad jokes? Well, that was sort of fixed and sort of not fixed. Like in the premiere when she lets him use the watch and he gets a really cool outfit out of it. Like I said, accent colors really help this kid out a lot. But after that, it's more just the same stuff until later, but that's a romance conversation. I will say the hyper-competent overplanner thing that the writers love to give her is still here. For some reason. Episode 3 is really bad with this. The whole thing is just Gabe trying to know who Ladybug is, and rather than thinking for a second when they tell him to go to Marinette's, he just follows the plan she laid out and ends up getting himself hurt. Why is a 14-year-old able to outthink a man who launched a multi-million-dollar company and hide the fact that he's a supervillain from everyone but the people he tells? Well, the answer is we need a way to put a ticking clock on this shit for the finale, and because it would be cool. I'm fine with plans working, but this seems more like a plan that could have been made up on the spot and been way more satisfying. Like, take out the fact that she made this up months ago and just uses her ice ring key as a way to get him out of Dodge and the Kwamis to answer honestly, then have the picture thing still be true, just not as part of the plan. More a way to keep business going for the owner, and then tell Kat, hey, meet me at the art museum and put this note in your bell, and bam, same outcome, just less 4D chess shit with her. I like planners, but planning to this degree is contrived to make your character seem smarter when the rest of the show shows she's better at reactive actions than pre-active planning, especially when she can't figure out who her partner or her greatest foe are with the same level of cognitive ability. Granted, she doesn't want to know Kat's identity, but still. You also cannot tell me that during all the stuff that happened in the last 7 months, that between making all those gifts for Adrien and planning out his schedule like that, along with school, superheroing, and friendship stuff, and general lifing, that she had time to do all of this. She's a wreck at the best of times under any pressure. Adding in this plan just seems to be wanting to make her better than if it didn't happen, especially when, for the rest of the season, she doesn't act like this. It's all her prior characterization of reacting, not thinking. Why make her a massive planner when you have other characters doing that shit? And I'm not trying to ruin the fun of things like this, but it gets to be frustrating when they either made this shit out to make her seem cooler, or because smart equals Batman in this genre. Also, not to put too fine a point on this, but she spends a lot of this season crying. Like, a lot more than others. Granted, that's because a lot of sad shit is happening to her, but it feels oddly out of place. Not that she was stoic or anything before, God knows I can't say that, but her reactions were either anxiety or anger. Tears were reserved for slightly bigger moments. Not a big thing, just it stuck out to me and so I wanted to bring it up. They also added this new tertiary character named So Clean to help with the backstory episode because Alia wasn't there and giving any of the other 4 girls that were there more screen time is just a crime. No, let's just add in a slightly more gangly version of Marinette so that we can do Who's That Ladybug for the 20th time in this show. I'm sure that won't be annoying. Anyway, So Clean is just backstory fodder for the Why is Marinette such a stalker episode that we need to have some words about derision. Derision is, quite frankly, the worst episode of the entire show. Yes, even worse than Albino Catboy here. This episode is just one extended flashback trying to excuse why Marinette has been a creepy stalker for the rest of the show. And just to spoil it for you, there is no justifiable reason that stalking is ever okay, especially to the degree she took it to. So, and I can't make this up, Marinette liked Kim for 25 seconds, so asked him to the pool. Chloe heard, so made Kim think it was a good idea to prank the queen of overreacting, and despite knowing what a colossal bitch Chloe was at this point, Kim just goes along with it like nothing out of the ordinary. It's so nakedly obvious that they wanted to retcon that element of her character from being an unfunny anime trope gone wrong into a tragic, deep, nuanced part of her character, when in reality all they did was put spiders in a box and had her fall into a pool. That's not grounds for stalking future love interests, that's grounds for a restraining order and a bout of PTSD, which she does have, by the way. It's just framed as a mental block rather than an actual issue from almost dying from a 30-foot drop at the hands of an idiot frat bro and his manipulator. Derision is so bad at what it tries to do that it actively makes Marinette a worse person. Overreacting is one thing, but actively rewriting a bad bit into a bad backstory is fundamentally ruining to a character to the point that I'm astonished that it got past the first draft. The problem with the stalking bit wasn't that it was unexplained. The problem was that it was too much too fast, and it felt super out of left field when her whole thing is anxiety and self-confidence fighting in the Denny's parking lot for dominance while she T-poses in the corner. Is that joke scan? The point being that if they had just quietly let that shit go, which they were already doing this season to a perfect degree, then I would have just been like, oh hey, that's gone. Neat. Moving along, and been done. But no, they just had to punch her down a little bit more than she already had been for no other reason than because creators and fans can't leave anything up in the air anymore. If it's not explained, it's a plot hole, and if it's a plot hole, it's bad. Despite that never being the case, and an unexplained element can be chalked up to, oh, hey, I guess they changed their mind, or, that wasn't the best idea, and moved away from it. I need to stop before I keep going because, believe it or not, we have more things to talk about than just Marinette. But we'll swing back to her later, I promise you that. For now, we gotta talk about our favorite cat.
Get to the point, Adrien. You can see I'm busy.
I don't want to be a model anymore.
Fine, if that's what you want.
Huh?
For the first half of the season, Adrien's just kinda in the background. The only real thing he does is tell his dad he doesn't want to be a model, and as if on a switch, changes his love target from Ladybug to Marinette. And I phrase it like this because it's not like it really adds up. The way the show was going, it seemed like he was falling for both of them and would have to choose which one to stick to. But now it just seems like he flipped the desire for the sake of adding more shenanigans to the romance. Otherwise, we just get more sad boy stuff. Deserved sad boy stuff, but this season didn't really have much for him to do besides be vocal for Marinette and stand up to Gabe. Not that that's a bad thing, but that's all I've ever wanted for this kid was to have more of a spine. I will say giving him more moments of sheer unbridled rage is a great idea. Finally letting out that pent-up anger and frustration is a really interesting character trait to give the teenager with the power to murder the world with a touch of his claws. One example I really like for its comparison to one of the best Justice League episodes is from Jubilation, which is a loose parallel telling of The Man Who Had Everything, where Superman is given a vision of his greatest desires, then has to let it go to come back to reality. Sound familiar? In the episode, Batman also gets taken under the Black Mercy's influence and has to willingly watch his parents die again. At the end, the villain also has the plant granting these paralyzing visions thrown onto him, and Batman has this to say.
I wonder what he's seeing.
Whatever it is, it's too good for him.
The interesting comparison is that Ladybug had a similar reaction to how Batman fared with it, but Cat is like Superman, and to put it lightly, they were pissed.
Do you have any idea what you did to me?
You should have stayed in whatever happy fantasy the Black Mercy granted you.
Happy! Do you know what I've lost?
How dare you play with our feelings! Cataclysm!
This rage and fire even comes up during his fight with Gabe in the penultimate episode, which we'll get to later, but as a character beat, it's really good for Adrien. He's had enough of his life taken away from him, and when he's given a future that he's wanted for as long as he can remember, he's quite literally ready to kill, to put the man who put him through this in the fucking ground. But unlike Clark, the person doing this to Adrien is an innocent man being mind-controlled and manipulated for the real bad guy's aims, so he doesn't get the catharsis that Clark did by beating the the living tar out of Mongol. This is compounded with Gabe hurting himself with Cat's Cataclysm, and because of his subsequent escape, taking the Lucky Charm, he can't be healed. I love this because even though Adrien is torn up, he acknowledged that Monarch was still a person, and it's a stark wake up to what his power can do. I wish this wasn't just a retread of that moment from the New York special, but hey, what can you do? It's interesting to me in tandem with the later Bloodlust because the two things complement each other so well. Another good example, ironically, comes from Derision when he learns what Kim did to Marinette. And I'm not gonna lie, I love this too. That's some interesting shit, man. I can't even lie. It could lead to an edgier path of self-control, which I know the internet loves to delve into, or it could be a real, honest-to-goodness look at someone who was neurodivergent dealing with that niggling thought of, what if? Especially with the responsibility he's been burdened with. They even hint at this for a brief moment when he has both jewels in hand, implying he's thinking about bringing back his mom, to be selfish for a moment, but then pushes it away. Like, that's a really good character beat, and I wish the rest of the show was like this more often. There's also just good moments with him being clueless I like when Alia says Marinette says she's not here and he just accepts it as, oh, she's actually not there, despite this being on Marinette's phone, but when she gets back on screen he goes,
Marinette, you're back?
Like, we love an oblivious king. He also gets time with his friends more and has things to do besides study the piano and practice Chinese. It's not exactly perfect, but given this season's actual content, I'm not mad, because with Gabe gone, we can have actual character things happen. What bothers me though is that even with him standing up to Lila and Chloe and Gabe and making a stand for who he is and what he wants, he's still caged for the final battle so that Marinette can have all the glory for herself and keeping him in the dark about his father's secret for no other reason than because it's good drama. Now, on the one hand, keeping this from his knowledge is good because then he could just be happy, and that's valid, but on the other, it leads into a not so great way to start a relationship on her end. Not to mention, again, it makes him less relevant to the conflict because if Marinette had not been sad about Adrien when Gabe struck at the dance, then it would have been another 2-on-1 thing and been no different than a standard fight. It would have been cool to have them start the fight as Lady Noir and Mr. Bug as a way to avoid the homing serum and a fun nod to the fans, but he get knocked out halfway in since he's not as practiced with her moveset, and then she gets the whole combined power-up moment. But instead, he's just stuck in a cell in a waking nightmare because she couldn't undo the curse that was put on him at the dance. Just something. Anything would have been better than that, you know? It would also end the secret identity thing, which would have been neat, but hey, gotta milk that for all it's worth, huh? Beyond all that, Adrien doesn't have a lot to talk about. He's definitely written well, but outside of being a normal teenager, he really hasn't got much going on that I didn't cover last time. I will say him taking charge and thinking on the fly of how to defeat Safari was really cool. It also gave us the power swap outfits again, which I'm always a fan of. That episode in particular is good because it flips their suit dynamics on their head even more than last time. The first time was more about showing their respective roles and snipping at fans about how they work. This time it's got more to do with her infatuation with him and his need to man up since he's got bigger things to worry about at the moment. This line was pretty good too.
I told you going to the movies was a good idea.
My suit has a really weird influence on you.
This episode is one of the few times the contrived nature to get them to do what it wants works because it's not just something plot related. It's a fun character piece with a good reason to change costumes. This episode in general is a better version of Reflect Doll, and you all remember how much I liked that one, but the big step up in quality is just from Adrien being able to stand his ground more and be the front runner. Makes me really wish they did this more, or that we were able to pop into an alternate dimension where this is the default. Oh well, let's see how everyone else is holding up, shall we?
Are you going to let your father talk to you like this, Chloe?
What? You think you're going to teach me how to be mean?
No, of course not. But you should go see your father at the palace to remind him that no one disobeys Chloe Bourgeois.
Yeah, that's pretty much Chloe this season, until Lila's shenanigans need to happen the way she wants them to for the show to keep going past its logical endpoint. A running theme this season is that unless it's about the relationship drama or the plot, it's not really touched on, which can be a blessing at times, but it leaves the characters that aren't in that with very little to go on about on their own. Anyway, Chloe was dragged through a thorn bush backwards up a hill several times last season, but this season she just does nothing until she needs to be a pawn for either Lila or Gabriel, though this line seems to be a clapback to fans by oversimplifying the problems in her life to,
Don't be mad at her. She's this way because her mother left her when she was young.
So did mine, and you don't see me having fun pulling Marinette.
which, no? It's way more complicated than that. Audrey is a monster to her family, and her daughter absorbed those bad habits to gain her mother's attention. Not even love, just attention. Not to mention, at that moment in time, the Queen Bee thing hadn't happened. But this past version of Chloe acts like season 5 Chloe, and thus it feels like backpedaling for the sake of the fans liking the writer's least favorite character. Again, like in the bigger video, the issue comes in from how well she was doing before season 3B happened. You can ignore her for every episode except for the few where she's a main player in and lose nothing, which is kind of what happened in season 4 too. Lila is more the standout, and even then I can't really get behind it because she's been side-eyeing and mumble planning her way through every conversation for 2 seasons now. It's boring and takes her away from being an annoying roadblock that Marinette has to overcome into an annoying scene stealer for the sake of becoming the next big bad. Although if the final shot of the season is to be believed, she's fucked off for the time being, but Lord knows I won't be that lucky. Her plans don't really add up either. She wants to get Chloe out of the picture, so puppets her into taking her father's role as mayor, which is just not how that works, but whatever. Then gets turned into the palette love child of Volpina and Haxon, and has Natalie send her information about Gabe and Emily, and it's just more setup. Like, can we just tie up everything except the butterfly brooch and Adrien not knowing his father's true self and leave everything else alone for 5 seconds? Why do we need this complicated master manipulator shit when the most it amounts to is stay tuned and find out? Look, I get it. If you hook people, they'll keep coming back. But at a certain point, just leaving the plot open for more stuff to happen is objectively worse than having a stinger at the end where she has the brooch and is now out for revenge. I remember people telling me this was good and seeing everyone making videos on what she was doing, and even one saying they should just throw her ass in jail, and just, I don't get it, man. I mean, I hate her too. Lock her up, no questions asked, but the only string to her bow is lying and scheming. She screams, "Take me seriously," and I never once have. Also, it took me till playing 7 Rebirth to realize that she and Tifa have the same hair. How dare you, Thomas? One of the best girls in all of gaming, and you make it so that I now associate her with this? For shame. This season makes me hate her more because it does what I asked, while also dragging Chloe down more. So remember when I said Chloe took over as mayor of Paris? Well, while doing all of that, she also got her pregnant teacher fired, her principal fired, and even got Marinette expelled from school 2 weeks before it was over, just because she could. When this happened, the fanbase was livid, and saw it as the last straw for the writers, since that was so stupid, so hilariously pulled out of their asses to make her evil, and overall just bad. It was so blatant that it was an attempt to break the fanbase's perception of her that they didn't even have her transform into anything. They just gave her a coat and some gloves, for God's sake. This abuse of power was kind of Bratz level cute in season 1 and 2, but after a decade of this, I'm just over it, especially after things like Queen Banana and Soul Crusher. Like, we get it, she's a bitch and she's spoiled, we fucking get it. I'd say either redeem her or go full villain, but they've gone so far that any half measure to redeem her would be seen as lazy, and honestly as a slap in the face. To the point, I'd have rather she got the brooch so that at least she'd be upgraded to an actual threat. Who knows though? If they do try and fix her and actually pull it off, I'll be genuinely stunned. But I'm not holding my breath on it. Someone that did surprise me though was a person I wasn't expecting.
What is it you want to tell me?
I don't know, but ever since I saw you, I haven't been able to stop thinking about you. I felt that you and I were the same. We have so much in common, and yet you're also so different. I've never met someone like you.
Felix was somehow the biggest heel turn in the show, and I love him for that. He went from being a holdover of Adrien's original design and personality for the sake of a bad sitcom plot, to a real character in the matter of 1 episode. And it wasn't even the one with the kabuki theater motif.
See ain't all that matters, all's not gold that glitters.
What can I say? I'm a sucker for earnest singing. Felix is the standout character this season for his major shift. At first, he has a very basic kids next door level plan of removing adults and people he deems to be in his way of existing with no repercussions. But then he has an existential crisis of creating a being just like him, only to discard it when it's no longer of use to him. Essentially having a mini character arc, because having him be a constant presence for the season would have been cool, I guess. But this beat is really intriguing because, well, he made a Sentimonster and then realized doing that and using them like everyone else is kind of fucked up, given that he is one and was treated like that his whole life by his his father. So after the Red Sun, he decides not to make one like that again, and in his next appearance, he does just that, relying on his new powers and own cunning to get away from Tsurugi and confess his adoration for Kagami. It's a really good set of episodes that show how to do a character arc like this, because at the end of the day, Felix just wanted to be a person and be seen as a real boy, and once he realized his first method was kinda fucked up, he changed his approach. He's still brash and a bit of a show-off if that song and subsequent stage show are anything to go by, but I'll be damned if they didn't make him work. And that's just a minor character. Wait till I tell you what they did to his girlfriend. Kagami. My word, did she hit the nail on the head for me. Seriously, her first appearance of the season has her say this.
You're going to ask Marinette out.
Huh? But why?
Because you obviously have feelings for her. Call her.
Of course I don't. She's just a friend.
You look at her the way I'd wished you looked at me.
And it made me sit the fuck up. The big reason is that I've literally said that to someone, and it really hurt when I could see they knew it too, just like it does her now. This is gonna be a running theme the whole season, isn't it? Well, apparently it is, as one of the next times she appears, she's turned back into her post and has to deal with the whole unrequited love thing, but in a more supportive role. It really puts Kagami's friendship with both of them to the test, given how much she loves both of them, albeit in different ways. And again, the conversation they have at the end of the episode is very reminiscent of one I've had in my personal life. It's a really strong character beat that shows people how to deal with this stuff in a healthy way. I will say I'm not a fan of her second appearance, as it's just more moping, and again, while I understand these feelings immensely, do not get me wrong, I really do resonate with it, moping doesn't accomplish anything, and it's not fun to see this same beat played out so many times by different characters. It lessens her good scenes by making it come off as if she's upset people have lives outside of her, despite them having good reasons to keep these things from her. It also doesn't help that she was able to move on relatively quickly, but that's sort of blunted by the fact that she basically got the classic Sonic to Adrien's modern Sonic as a consolation prize, given that Felix is just Adrien's concept design before switching his entire being mid-production. These two together are a treat. They're in sync, they're calm, they make good decisions, they have the same bass monotone to their performance, and they actually get together in a timely manner. I was gonna save this for the romance section, but I want to highlight it here because I think it's important. From the episode in which Felix appears for the season to the episode they get together are one apart. It's literally establish the desire, then act on it, then do some plot shit after, and it's good. It's solidly told and gets what it needs across to the audience without wasting time, so that we aren't just waiting around for them to get to the point. This is something they also did with Nino and Anya and Ivan and Milen. Funny enough, if they aren't gay and aren't the main characters, the writers can write a good relationship. Now isn't that odd? All of this would be nothing though, if there wasn't that oh so important ticking clock, Gabriel.
I can't give up now.
No.
If you don't help me make the wish come true, I won't be able to save myself. I won't be able to save you either. If we don't do something, Adrien will be left all alone.
So in the third episode of the season, Gabe gets hit by Kat's power and gets away with a status quo object, leaving him to slowly rot from the outside in. This is then compounded by him using SAS for what has to be days at a time, resulting in a time limit that is ever so coincidentally in sync with the end of the season. This results in him teaming up with Tsurugi to make these apple rings essentially, that let him track negative emotions more and transfer miraculous powers to the villains for more varied fights. Some are creative, like in Aquami's Choice, where they give the bad guy the ability to multiply, make a shield, and throw rocket punches, but like from arms this time. You guys remember Arms? That game was weird. Anyway, this was a really interesting idea on paper, but the catch is that the ring can only give one power at a time, so they need to be wearing multiple rings to do it, and it's just... I mean, what a lame restriction to put on it. Hell, in one episode they gave Pharaoh the ability to use the shield only for it to come up once, and then it's over. Not to mention, the amount of people that can shake off an Akuma is just really getting dumb at this point. I mean, if an AI can do it of their own volition, then what is the hold this thing has on people? All of this is to basically keep the heroes busy while the Apple Watch is sold worldwide, and to enough people that they can be turned into Apple Store employees to track down the dysfunctional duo. And that's kinda it. Unlike past seasons where the plot happens, or rather doesn't happen, is so that it can fit into a 26 episode season long arc. Here it just kinda doesn't. For example, season 4 only happens the way it does because Gabe is getting more desperate, and then the writers let him get a small win out, and then we transition into this. Season 3 is just fucking around until they find the Guardian, and so on and so forth. This is the first time the Watsonian and Doylist explanations line up to something coherent. This rather lackadaisical approach to the hero side of things lets the characters breathe more and have real dynamics to play with. I was honestly shocked at how much of this season focuses on Adrien at all, and actually makes him feel like a secondary primary main character, and it all comes down to how Gabe treats him and Marinette. Oh, that's another thing, Marinette and Gabe actually have scenes together, and Gabe has this rising hatred for her since she's getting in the way of his vision for Adrien's future. There's this one really effective scene where he uses pancakes. Oh yeah, Gabe's weird thing this season is that he makes breakfast a lot, mainly pancakes, and I don't know what that's about, but in this scene, the metaphor is whether or not she'll give up her dream of Adrien willingly in exchange for all the wealth and power she could want in the fashion world, or say no and still lose him to Gabe's petty bullshit. And I like this a lot, because it's a solid way to give your characters a choice, even if there really isn't much of one. She still loses him and still can't be with him, but she chooses him over all of that for the sake of being happy with him for as little time as she gets to spend with him, and I think that's important.
You know what the problem is with your pancakes? Way too much flour, not enough butter. You're using an old, completely outdated recipe. No one likes them like that anymore. And that's the good thing about being a baker's daughter. I don't even need to try them to know that they're tasteless.
It shows that she's gotten to know the real him and like him for him, not what he could possibly do for her. And that's something to get out of the viewer's head because that was a popular hot take from people for a while. So gotta give him points on that one, I like that scene a lot. This season also had the best balance of the hero to life stuff because the conflicts happen at like the 13-minute mark, so they have to resolve it and have a good conclusion afterwards, so that leads to less complicated and drawn out fights when at this point the character work was what people wanted to care about. Yeah, the action's fun, and some episodes are really good puzzle-solving issues, but others could really drag on with the action, and it just got kind of boring after a while. Having said all of that, we need to talk about the ending of the ending. I've already covered the broad strokes of the finale, mainly the rings, but the reason that Kat isn't in this fight is because they wanted Marinette to have all the glory, and so that Adrien wouldn't find out his father is more of a monster than he already knows him to be. The in-universe explanation is that the day before, he and Gabe had their own standalone fight, where they both got some good licks in on each other, and Gabe hits him with some fear gas, so the kid's having anxiety and nightmares. Which, I gotta say, this fight is really good. It's just the right amount of tense, and has a good back and forth for these two that only one of them has any context for, and it's the one that matters, and it's just choreographed well. Overall, probably the best fight in the show. It sucks that he can't be in the finale for author pet reasons, but I still really like this fight on its own. It also doesn't hurt that it takes up half the episode, which makes it feel more grand and personal given the context.
If I were your father, I would start by teaching you some manners!
And if I were your son, I'd tell you that you can't always make decisions for other people. That to have a child is to help them blossom, to grow, to find themselves and to be free!
This, I feel, makes the ending come off more hollow, given that Marinette has very little to do with Gabe. Like, yes, she is dating his son against his wishes, but that's really it. Having Adrien there would have made this all mean something, because as it stands, we get a pretty good fight, broken up with random shots of characters from the specials, saving the day or getting their shit rocked, and then he wins. Gabe gets the jewels, makes his wish, and goes out being remembered as a hero. That's just insulting at this point. After 5 full seasons, several specials, and 8 years of building up to this moment, the cat's away, the bug gets both jewels at play, and Gabe wins the day. He doesn't have to answer any of his crimes, he doesn't have to see anything happen to his life or his empire, and his wife and her girlfriend get to live while his son no longer has him in his life. What kind of an ending is that? It's Game of Thrones level bad of writing to let him win and then have the bastard die so that no justice is had for his victims, and he gets rewarded for doing terrible things. Sure, he's dead, but at the end of the day, that was gonna happen either way. If he hadn't stunned her, he would have been dead hours later, and Adrien would be without both parents because of his actions. Now, I'm not saying I want that. Adrien deserves to be happy with people who love him, but if you remove the cataclysm from the equation, Gabe no longer has the out of death, and instead would have still won or been in prison where he could have at least been some kind of a better father than he was before being discovered. This ending is bad all the way down, except that Adrien is now no longer under Gabe's rule and has 2 parental figures that actually love him. And while I will take that W, that cannot save what is an otherwise mixed bag of an ending. Also, I'm gonna say it, Bug Noir's eyes looks like she has yellow fever mixed with melanoma. The outfit looks sick as hell, and the double braided ponytails works surprisingly well. The reason this fight holds up though is because of the constant power usage, which is just horribly explained in the episode where Chloe takes over Paris. So in this episode, they finally remove the time limit on their powers and their power limit use by willing themselves to do so. It's said in an earlier episode that they'll get these abilities when they're older.
She doesn't need to transform back before she uses her power again?
No, because she's an adult.
But then this episode just says they're older and force themselves to stay transformed. Why this works or how that equals automatic unlimited power usage or how it makes sense, I do not know. But fuck it, the finale would have been boring, I guess, if they didn't do this. One minor note before we move on to the romance, I liked Gimme. This all-powerful being just wanting to strike up a chat that is then bored by humans wanting yet another wish is kinda cute, almost like a genie in a way.
To each wish it's sacrificed because the universe is balanced. For example, if you wish for garden peas to turn red, then strawberries will have to turn green.
Plagg and Tiki's true forms were also really cool to see. They actually feel like immortal cosmic beings, and that's hard to pull off. Makes me wonder what the other ones look like. Like, is Saz the Great Snake or Stomp this massive Abe the Ox-like thing? Just something to think about, I suppose. With the B plot covered, I think it's time we dive into the real story.
We're stuck. How silly being stuck. We should try to loosen up.
It's okay to be stuck sometimes. I can help you.
Loosen up? Nah, no. It's okay. I can do it myself. Nah.
Surprisingly enough, I have a lot to say on this particular topic, because while the romance checks off a lot of my boxes on what I wanted to be fixed, they still keep finding ways to throw wrenches into it early on. Let's just get the bad stuff out of the way first, because while it's there, it becomes less omnipresent as the season progresses. First, and this is a minor thing, they keep doing these little shippy lines for Kagami and Luca for their same-sex options, and I was very confused as to why other than just being spiteful. I mean, I'm glad these two have friends, but they literally delete Luca from the plot once he tells Marinette he knows their identities, which is just really dumb because they could have just done what I suggested before and made him and Adrien closer so that he has someone to talk to about this stuff. That's what makes Alya and Marinette so strong, and Alya and Nino. Giving them something like this to talk about would be helpful in strengthening their bonds as friends. But no, we just gotta remove her romance option so it just becomes Adrien or nothing, I guess. I really hate this plot point. Secondly, they retcon the statue kiss scene to be less creepy, which is just... no? You can't and won't and didn't do that. All you did was make it so the victim of an assault had to apologize to his assailant and then backpedal for her so that she wouldn't feel bad. Now, she didn't know it was him when she wanted to kiss the statue, but that doesn't make it any less creepy and any less of an assault, however unintentional. Her feeling bad and him forgiving her is the correct way to handle this and would show her growth more than the season already had, but nope, they just pin the blame on his reaction and then move on like it never happened. I understand forgiveness, and I understand how hormones can affect how people are around one another, but this should have been a nice, open conversation that relays their feelings that isn't interrupted by her stammering or running off or a villain. There's more than one way to do this, guys, come on! And while they do talk about it, it's not the healthiest way it could have been done, which in this specific instance is a problem. Another thing they do is flip the love diamond so that Marinette likes Catboy and he likes Marinette, meaning that in secret he's blushy and awkward, and in the suit she's a babbling moron for like 3 episodes and it's annoying. I'll swing back to this episode in a moment, but that whole love D4 leads us into Reunion and how they completely disrespect the dead person. In this episode, the writers have Marinette summon the memory of Joan of Arc, who was once in love with the holder of the Black Cat Ring. Why she couldn't just ask Tiki how this love story went, seeing as she was there for all of it, I don't know, but none of that matters. What I and a lot of other people take umbrage with is the erasure of who Joan of Arc even was. We all know the gist of who they were, a young AFAB person who got their way into the army because they felt it was God's will for them, and being killed for woman crimes by the English. But what a lot of people don't know is that they were also very obviously trans. From what I've been able to research, even their own friends would say it was normal and not out of the ordinary for them to wear masculine clothes, and it was even rumored they preferred to court people of their own age regardless of their gender. History on the whole has referred to Joan as a woman, but I would rather not misgender a dead person like that, so I've been calling them by neutral pronouns so as not to impose one way or the other. But my point in bringing all of this up is that history, as far back as the 1930s, have seen them as a trans and LGBTQ icon respectively for how they were in life, not what the Catholics portrayed them to be after. So how do you think I felt when they depicted one of the most famous French LGBTQ historical figures as a cis woman whose only notable contribution to the episode is giving a long-winded answer to a trick question and helping Marinette with her boy troubles by depicting themselves as a heterosexual woman who was only in love with a cisgendered man? The short answer was I, and a lot of other people, were pretty pissed about this. It's such a slap in the face to who they were and what they stood for. That being, God loves you no matter what because they made you, and that their death was a tragedy, not a heroic act of patriotism. All you would have to do is use they as a pronoun and say something to the effect of one of my many lovers stood out, and boom, that fixes all of this. But by sticking to this heteronormative bullshit, it leaves a bad taste in your mouth about the whole episode because that's all it's got going for it. If you cut this episode out of the season, you quite literally lose nothing, and in fact, it makes the romance stronger because she didn't need to ask permission to be happy, which is, ironically, in a way, what Joan of Arc stood for. Other than those things, I think the relationship between these two is charming, well told, and all around really solid in what it brings to the table. In that episode where they start liking the other versions of themselves, they do this really important beat that I think is good for Adrien in particular. In this scene, the two share a kiss in the civilian hero dynamic, and he's into it, but then understands it's an egregious misuse of power, so backs off to make it clear that this isn't okay on his end because she's a fan of his. But then Marinette gets akumatized, and his reaction is to shout,
Marinette, kiss me!
To break the spell and have a massive freakout about it because he just crossed a line and felt like he was playing with her emotions and just... God, that's a really good beat. That's good character writing, and it matters because it also puts into perspective for her why dating Kat wouldn't work. It's almost like the writers realized they've been underwriting Adrien for 7 years, and so decided to just give him good character moments every episode. Took you long enough, but I'd rather have good stuff at some point than not at all, but I digress. During the actual dating part of things, I really like how he's so patient with her. He lets her be herself and weird and awkward, while he wants to make her comfortable while not stepping on her toes about it. It's the good fucking food, guys. Like, I wish I wasn't happy about it, but it's nice to see healthy stuff in this dumpster fire, for once. Not only that, but when she comes to have an impromptu picnic with him in her pajamas because spontaneity, he has her wait a second and then goes and changes into his pajamas. That's super sweet. Like, legitimately, that's just adorable. I love that shit. This is what bothers me though. Like, this is 8 years of wanting characters to get together and stop dancing around shit, and now that we have them together, I want more. I want to see the nice, sweet things they'll do for one another, or how they'll comfort one another. Stuff like that, just little tiny things that are just the important part of a relationship.
You don't need to be jealous anymore.
I should have said something sooner, but Marinette's right. Lila's a pathological liar and a talented one at that. She always manages to lie her way out of trouble.
Aw, look how we'd say anything for his sweetheart. They sound like a real couple now.
That's super sweet of you, Adrien, but you don't have to defend Marinette, you know.
I want movie dates and shared glances and sleepovers and all that shit, but at the same time, I'm also angry and annoyed that it took this long to get here simply because of how well it's written. You can't tell me this isn't a little frustrating. Like, there isn't a little voice in the back of your head saying, why didn't we get this at the end of season 2? When this happened, I wasn't cheering or even smiling. I legitimately said out loud, finally, now maybe they can actually do something else with this. Baiting your fans for years and making the one-sided aspect feel more creepy than it ever should have been makes moments like this go from elating to eye-roll inducing because it stopped mattering a long time ago. It was never a matter of if, but when. And this scene's lack of punch, despite the swelling music and panning camera, proves that it only went on so long because it was profitable to string people along with 2 ongoing plot lines that have underwhelming conclusions as opposed to 1. Let me ask this real fast. If season 2 ended with them getting together and we got 2 full seasons of supportive couple stuff with them being fully involved in their lives, and only now in season 5 Gabe starts to break them up, wouldn't that have meant something? Wouldn't it have been a more interesting idea? It would also make Kagami feel like more than just a romantic rival, because now she has to go along with the lie even more, and it would strengthen their bond as friends even further, and make this scene in the season 3 finale hit different, but I digress. One thing I liked was them putting the instrumentals of Stronger Together from the movie in the background of a lot of romantic scenes. It's pulling this effective sleight of hand where it reminds you of a better told version of this story so that you can really dig into this version.
Wait, don't go.
Stop that. Stop doing good things and being good. Either be good more often or keep being shit. You're supposed to be bad. Who let you be good all of a sudden? Because that's good writing. That's good shit on display. And the rest of the series would have been better off if we had more stuff like this in it. It's honestly insane how just a leitmotif can affect a scene. And besides using the generic piano version of the show's opening theme, they rarely use music in an engaging way. So when they do it here, it's really nice. You know what else is nice? Zoe telling Marinette that she likes her. Odd segue, I know, but I wanted to get this in here because it's a 1-episode arc that tells us that Zoe likes her and that it's okay to go for what you want even though they don't feel the same way. It's honestly the healthier version of both the Adrien and Marinette story and the Kagami situation, given how she handled it in this very season. It's also nice to have a same-sex love confession and it not be a big goddamn deal, although the rather coy way they keep using gender-neutral pronouns in the opening is a dead giveaway if you're paying attention. Now, if we can only get writers to give Achillic characters this kind of screen time in TLC, we'd be all good. Because Miss Bustier is also revealed to be a lesbian this season, and while I'm happy for her, the animation ratio for positive gay male content is kind of slim pickings at this point. Whereas every show seems to have at least one sapphic person in the cast. Not that I mind that, but I just want to be more balanced, you know? But yeah, Zoe, that was cool. Hope they do more with her next season, cause she really didn't do much else this time. The romance in general is good. I'd say I even like it if you put the season's version of it in a bubble. Despite the ick I mentioned before, it's not bad, and really got me to feel for them as a couple, despite the looming threat of that reveal she's gonna have to drop on him in the future, but that's not this season's problem. Which, why is it he can't know or Felix tell him that he's a centimonster? Like, that is so dumb it actively makes me angry, because Felix's whole thing is about living your truth and fuck anybody who gets in your way. And you know what? That's a pretty good segue into what I consider to be the peak of Season 5.
I'll save you! Don't worry, cockroach! I'll catch you! Ooh.
Try that again, flea bag!
The Paris special is one of the best things this show has ever done. Not only is it funny, not only is it well paced, not only is it a parallel world story, which I'm always a slut for, but it also does exactly what the rest of the show should have been doing all along. The other specials have required the duo to go somewhere else to get the plot going, and thus it takes a while to establish the new cast and their whole gimmick. Here it gets right into the action because it starts on the right beat. This, for some reason, was released in December when it takes place on the same night as the pilot, which would have been a nice bit of foreshadowing for that growing up plot point I mentioned earlier, but whatever. It only needs to spend a little time setting things up because you already know the bit they're doing. Alternate dimension versions of our heroes come in to fuck shit up and do a thing, and our versions have to stop them. It's a trope done as old as time. So much so that DC Comics has done it 3 separate times in 3 different canons that I can name off the top of my head. The Justice Lords, the Injustice Syndicate, and the Crime Syndicate. Real creative naming there, guys. 10 out of 10. Anyway, this simple concept seen in other superhero media allows us to, aside from a brief conversation with Tiki, skip explaining the dense concept of a multiverse and get to the fun shit. Half the special isn't even about fighting. It lets us get to know the deviations from our kids in a way that's more than just, they're evil, cause they're not. The world they come from is run by a dictator who I'm 90% sure is their version of Fu, which if so is a good call so that we can see his ass get trounced for once. I still hate this old man, but probably it's Chloe or something because Thomas just can't let her be. With that though, it lets these two be some sort of a mirror for how our versions could have been. The interesting thing is that they aren't all that dissimilar. They've just been told to act a certain way, otherwise they'll die. On top of that, they've been lied to about how their powers work by the Supreme, so they just keep using them willy-nilly with no thought of what it's doing to them because they've never had to call out the ladybugs to fix the damage, or so much as even have a conversation with Tiki or Plag because they've been gagged, so there's no one to contradict what he's been telling them. I will say that it makes this whole thing a little less fun because they're no longer just bad versions of these people. They've been manipulated so that all blame is put on someone else. I think that's just a little less interesting than it could have been. Having said that, it leads to a very natural sense of being stuck when you're already decaying from the inside out because you weren't told about the consequences before, and so might as well act up as much as possible so your loved ones aren't put in danger. That's a really solid motivation and makes them sympathetic without making them less of a threat. It's also a showcase of how bad people, or people who are manipulated in this case, on top of what our heroes could have been if they hadn't had the friends around them to make life worth living. We see this in the base show, with Adrien becoming more tempted to kill people with his power now that he's had people taken away from him. It shows in Claws because of how unafraid he is by being cataclysmed and how willing he is to throw his life away if it means he'll get recognition. Cause remember, he and Shadybug don't know about the wish until they read Marinette's diary, making the finale more of a frantic race to get a better life and commiserate with their alternate selves. I would have liked it if they had talked to the other versions of each other, you know, really putting that knowledge of your best friend / partner thing at play and giving more tension to the whole do they know thing. But I get why that doesn't work given where it's placed, but still, well, I can dream. Something I really like about this was that due to them constantly trying to steal each other's jewels for the thrill of it, we get to see a more selfish side of the kids that normally isn't allowed for some reason. On top of that, we get to see a version of the duo that knows who each other are and how they do like each other, cause once it's revealed who the other one is, they soften a little. It is funny that this version of Marinette hates Adrien for being rich, and Adrien loves her because she's one of the poorest whom's works, but is also just so cool and edgy and emo, you guys. So seeing that flipped on its head was kinda neat. Their designs are also stellar. Both of them knock it out of the park. The more saturated red and black for her, coupled with her hair, is super interesting. Also, bravo in that her hair is in her eyes when she's in team mode, but the bangs get pushed up so that she can see better in the suit. Very cool idea, very subtle detail. I love that kind of character work. That is so good. The red streak is also really cool. It adds that touch of color that her hair normally lacks because it's just the same in the suit as it is out of it. As for him, it's just sick, man. Like the leather jacket, the studded boots, the mohawk, it's all just so fucking cool. It's also nice that his hair is this deep emerald, which hides him better since his hair is normally bleach blonde. Oh, and check this out. His bow staff, which he leans on like a thug in a bad 80s movie, I love this kid so much, splits apart and becomes nunchucks with cat paw blades at the end of them. That is so dumb and it wraps around to being cool again. Can our Adrien do that? Cause if so, someone teach him how to do that like yesterday. Holy shit.
Tiki, lots on.
Plag, daggers out.
The redesigns at the end are fine, I guess. She has a lighter hair and a more evenly distributed color palette, which is kind of boring if I'm being honest, especially since you want to keep the older designs to elude the superior if you're switching sides in case he wants to take the bugs back, but I get why it was done for a happy ending. Adrien's design is cool. He keeps the same base design but adds a bit of gold accents to the lining of things, which while not as fun as the green, I get, but still not the best change. I'm going into this so much because those simple character arcs that make them better people are kinda what's been missing from the show. Satisfying payoffs. Sure, season 5 ends the will they won't they and kills off Gabe, but that shouldn't have taken 5 seasons to get to. That should have been 2 and 3 respectively, and then moved on to a new threat thereafter. Ironically, I like Gabe a lot in this special. The name is really stupid, but I like the actual use of a butterfly in his mask and cape.
My name is Betterfly.
Oh god, that's so stupid. Not to mention, he sings the intro this time.
Miraculous, fear is a cage. Hear the message, answer the call.
Why is it like this? Like, it sounds awful. Not that he can't sing, the movie showed that he can very well, but you can't tell me this wasn't given enough takes or the post-production touch-ups that it needed, and it makes it so awkward. Nice storyboards, by the way, guys. Did the world's opening logo thing take up too much of the budget? Because I feel like it did. Anyway, the plot has Gabe come to this world to ask for help, the Titanic twosome follow him, and they spend the night fighting over a grown man in a lavender cape, which then morphs into the jewels like every other bad guy, and them teaming up with our Gabe, which is a cool little idea to me. The four have a heart-to-heart-to-heart-to-heart like Rika before them, and basically defeat Gabe by them choosing to stop working with him. How did he become the bad guy of this again? It doesn't matter. The point is that it's a fun nothing plot, but what it does for our characters is interesting. The ending does raise a plot hole though. Gabe tries to go to the other universes, and Marinette keeps following him and kicking his ass, and he keeps trying. Why didn't he just wait till the other Gabe went home to try again like a week later? What was stopping him then? You see what I mean with this show? Every good idea has a little asterisk attached to it to annoy me. The universes he goes to are a good way to reuse old models, like a world where Scarabella and Kitty Noir are the default heroes. I liked them as a duo, I thought they worked. I even like Zoe's design, if not for the clashing colors. Other ones are the original 2D concept for the show to get the 2D animation purists to bust a nut, a world based on the comics, and even a world where Mr. Bug and Lady Noir are a thing. Oh hey, they actually did that. Neat. Too bad that even in that universe, Marinette has to be the one to kick ass. See, in every universe, she's merged with the butterfly brooch to stop Gabe, seeming like it was our Marinette in every universe. But no, it's actually that universe's Marinette rather than just being the ladybug holder, so even in the universe where Adrien is the ladybug holder, he's still not the important one. Fuck you, Tom, that is so petty. This special is the best of the season, and it still has many little hanging things that stop it from being perfect, but it does everything it needs to be fun and enjoyable on its own, which I think is the most important part of a special like this. Now, only if that stinger at the end of the season made sense in context to all this, we'd be all good. Hopefully they follow that up at some point. Season 5 is a mess, and I don't envy the writers who had to write this stuff because it's coming off of 2 seasons of shit back to back, and having to wrap up the 2 major plots at the same time while also setting up the next few seasons. However, they still chose to write it like this. The bad ending, the backpedaling of creepy shit, the straight washing of an LGBTQ icon, all of that was still a choice they made and something that holds the season back despite everything else that has going for it. The rings, the dynamics, the characters besides Chole and Lila, all of that is good, but those bad decisions stop it from being better than what came before it. When the big video came out, I had tons of people telling me that season 5 was awful, terrible, completely a waste, and given that ending, I can see what they meant. But I liked a lot of these episodes. Only 4 of them were really terrible to get through, and the rest fell on a scale of to decent to great. And that's why the season makes me angry, because it could have been so much more, but chose to be shit. My name is Chris. Again, if you liked this, I'd appreciate it if you could like, subscribe, and do all those fun things. The links to the Discord as well as my Patreon are in the description, and as always, I hope you have a fractastic day.